It feels like the season just started, and yet it also feels like Barcelona are playing in a match that could very well decide their entire campaign. But as you know, I always say, it's September, so do not get too high or too low for any one particular match. But as you also know, I'll immediately contradict myself and say that a huge loss by a large margin is going to feel like the club is once again being descended into chaos and is not where we think that they should be. A loss by a slim margin, well, that one's quite interesting because I'm probably going to throw that away and say that that means that this timeline, the one that Xavi has his team on, is right on schedule. For a victory, though, once again, contradicting myself that I shouldn't get too high or too low, that's going to tell me that Barcelona are ready to honestly turn the page on this European nightmare that they've been living for the last few seasons. And while it doesn't completely turn the page, I think knockout competition, getting to a semifinal or getting to a final, of course winning a Champions League, that will really put the nail in the coffin of all of this doom and gloom that Culés have. But a win against Bayern by any margin is going to go a long way in really starting that next chapter. Now let's get into the match itself and ask the question, what will or what should or what can we expect Xavi to do? And I think almost no matter where you go, a lot of people I've had on my podcast, a lot of people I trust, they've got the same starting 11 that I do, and the one that Xavi probably should put forward. And if he doesn't, that means he maybe has something up his sleeve. There could be a surprise. But like many others, my guess is that forward line is going to be Dembélé, Lewandowski, and Rafinha. In the midfield to see Pedri, Busquets, and Gavi. And along that back line, I think it should be Alejandro Balde, Garcia, Araujo, and then Koundé at right back. I could also see Araujo at right back, depending on how Xavi wants to set this up. But as we're going to get into the tactics later, I think it's going to be Koundé at right back because Bayern Munich do love to come through the middle. Now for this squad, I'll go over the pros and cons as we get into a little bit more of what Julian Nagelsmann, Bayern Munich's coach, could be thinking on the other sideline. Because based on recent results, I think Xavi is expecting a game where Bayern, at least in the goal scoring department, are going to be a bit feast or famine. And to that end, I think it feels like Xavi might have a bit of advantage in preparation because of some of those recent struggling scorelines that Bayern has had, at least by their own standards. Because while they have put up numbers like 5-3, 5-0, 6-1, and 7-0, they've also had a good 2-0 against Wolfsburg and a good 2-0 against Inter last week. But they have settled for 3 straight draws in the Bundesliga, 1-1, 1-1, and 2-2. It is hard to criticize the results of a team that is still unbeaten to start the year, but if Barca had 3 straight draws in domestic competition heading into this match against Bayern Munich, I guarantee that pundits will be saying that Barcelona are not ready for this match and are not coming in their best form. And Barca, meanwhile, have scored no fewer than 3 goals. That was the 3-0 over Sevilla in the last month. 4-1, 4-0, 3-0, 5-1, and 4-0. Some will criticize the way that Barcelona have got to those numbers in recent matches, like the 4-0 against Cadiz and how it took 30 minutes plus to break down that side. But I would tell those critics that these games are played over 90 minutes, and Barcelona kept a clean sheet at that. So there will come moments in every game when Barcelona can be on the front foot. And let me just add a little more detail to that soapbox that I'm on right now. That's the intangible belief that I have for Barcelona against Bayern Munich in the Champions League this time around, even in Germany. These matches are played over 90 minutes, and there will be many, many moments that Bayern, in that course of those 90 minutes, will have an opportunity to be the dominant team. And I expect them to be the dominant team in this game. But for every preseason game, including the Clasico and every single match this season, there is at least a 20 to 25 minute stretch where you can clearly say, this is the time when Barca should put the ball in the net because they are dominating their opponent. And even on the back foot against Bayern, I think those 20 minutes will come against the Bavarians. And the question for Barcelona is, can they capitalize when the moment arises? With formations, it's a little less about the actual numbers and getting lost in that nuance than it is about the space that both of these formations will leave for the other team to exploit. For Barca, as I said before, I'm going with that 11 because it allows Barca to comfortably build in a 3-4-3 and defend in the 4-3-3 shape. As we've discussed before, because Barca play with such a high line of confrontation, they can leave themselves exposed on the counterattack to speedy forwards in the opposition. At this point though, Barca are still pressing in such a way that they are even more devastating when they retake the ball than other teams, but more susceptible to be passed through if someone makes a mistake. That's because unlike Bayern, who presses a unit, but then generally recycle possession and then use their superior runners and technical ability to strike, depending on where the turnover happens, 2 players for Barca may rush the player on the ball for the immediate turnover, which in turn leaves those behind to man mark. Unfortunately, if one of those players isn't quick enough to the man or a few steps off, the opposition is one pass away to breaking through Barca's press and being off to the races. That's a major key for me for Barca. If they keep their press disciplined and make the most of those opportunities to take the ball away high, it'll lead to success. Because in the same breath, this is the most technically gifted team that Barca will face maybe all season long. And breaking through their defenders and their midfielders and not having the ball come right back down your throat is a bit more of a riskier proposition than any other team. Now our focus shifting to Bayern, where I remind you, don't get too lost in the formations here. Because while on paper it's a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2, in reality it's a 4-2-2-2 with some really important details. We say 4 at the back, but as you know, with the likes of Alphonso Davies on the left and either Benjamin Pavard or Nassau Mizraoui on the right, they are going to push high, especially Davies on the left, because the rest of that 2-2-2 will start attacks from the middle and work outwards. Whether it's Kimmich and Sabitzer or Kimmich and Goretzka, their three options are to control amongst themselves, shuffle to the front four, or get it wide for the fullbacks getting forward. And that takes us to the front four. And I say front four because of the fluidity and flexibility of this group. Their right wing does take a hit with the absence of Kingsley Coman, who seems to be the first choice right winger for Julian Nagelsmann. But Barca will still be seeing 4 of the 5 of Sadio Mane, Thomas Muller, Leroy Sané, Serge Gnabry, and Jamal Musiala. From that group, I guess Sané probably being on the wing, Gnabry won't be coming through the middle as the attacking midfielder, and neither Musiala or Muller will be on the right wing. I guess I didn't mention the back line yet, but I felt like I wanted to get through this preview without bringing up Manuel Neuer. We're all familiar with him. For the center backs, just like Xavi, Nagelsmann has an interesting choice on his hands. Does he go with the 2 right-footed center backs in Dayot Upamecano and Matthias de Ligt, or does he go with the left-footed Lucas Hernandez and de Ligt? There is no wrong answer there and very little difference, but Lucas Hernandez is just a little more tidy with a pass, and Upamecano is a bit better at closing down space. That said, kind of breaking our brain with what we know, from what I've seen so far this year, Upamecano has had moments where he's the better one on the ball, but not getting it right in the defending department, and Lucas Hernandez, well, switch him. I've seen him not be too tidy on the ball, but be pretty good at the back. The good news for Barcelona is because much like their very own press, because Bayern Munich's fullbacks push so high, one ball in behind on those wings could be the undoing of this Bayern side. And especially if you have, let's say, some kind of winger that's elite at getting out on the counter-attack, say Ousmane Dembélé. And then you have some kind of elite center striker that's ready to put the ball in the back of the net at a moment's notice. Say a Robert Lewandowski, who I would guess is going to be a little more than motivated against his former team. And I think that leads me into revisiting what I said on the podcast and probably correcting myself on what I said on the pod and analyzing and figuring out who are the most important players in this game. I think anybody could be the player that we look at and say, hey, that player decided this match, but in particular, there are the stars that we know. And I think when the lights get brightest in Europe, that those bright stars need to be the ones that decide these fixtures. With the recent history between these two teams, I don't need to remind you of that, Bayern will be the team that I expect to come out swinging. And Barcelona are going to have to survive that first knockout punch in the first 10 to 15 to 20 minutes of this match. And that first swing certainly begins for Bayern with their biggest troll, at least on social media and in interviews, and that's Thomas Muller. How the center backs and Busquets handle him will likely be the biggest key to this game. Regardless who are lined up at fullback for Barca, and that includes Koundé and Araujo, Bayern will find opportunities to get down the wings. And I think Barca are adept enough to handling that. The issue is when the ball comes back inside and where Muller will be. Because Muller's movement so far this season hasn't been about Muller. He has just a goal and 2 assists. But it's more about how Musiala and Mane and how they move in relation to him. It makes sense that Musiala liked Barcelona growing up, because a 19-year-old could easily fit into the Blaugrana setup as well. His star is shining brighter and brighter, and he's leading his team with 4 goals and an assist this year. When watching them play, there is a fluidity to his game, and I think the similarities between the way he plays and Pedri plays are kind of almost identical, with the huge difference being that Musiala has less defensive responsibilities and therefore is higher up the field to score more goals. Mane, meanwhile, has 3 goals in 7 appearances this year. And while that doesn't exactly scream, my goodness, he's really hit the ground running since coming from Liverpool, any fears that he wouldn't fit into Bayern Munich and needed to be under the tutelage of Klopp have been quickly forgotten. Mane comes at you from all sides, and what he represents is constant danger. Because he can get in behind at will, he's always attracting the attention of at least one defender, meaning too many eyes are on him and not enough are on his teammates. I'm going to round out my Bayern players to concern yourself with 2 familiar entries. Joshua Kimmich, and Alphonso Davies. Throughout a season, Davies won't often be dealing with someone like Rafinha or Dembele when they switch wings, and if he can find the balance between shutting them down and going forward, Barca will run out of answers quickly. And Kimmich is basically the same argument except dealing with Pedri. I do wonder though if Nagelsmann won't just have Sabitzer be Pedri's shadow, which would allow, in theory at least, and Gavi is also on the field, but that in theory would allow Kimmich to get on the ball a bit more, allow him to play those diagonal passes that he's so good at, and to really be the focal point of dealing with Barcelona's press. Little wrinkles like that is going to be what's going to decide this game. And then for Barca, I think it comes down to their spine. I know what I said before, but I did mull it over a bit more, and the more I thought about how the brighter the lights get, as I said, the more important the players that we expect to star will need to star. The most important player in this game is Robert Lewandowski. It's not even the revenge element. Like I said last week against Victoria Pilsen, the Polish striker is the difference between Barca in Europe then and Barca in Europe now. He's the player that gets a result in these games that Barcelona did not have last season. He's got 9 goals in 6 games plus 2 assists in under 500 minutes of play. He's scoring a goal every 52 minutes. I don't care who Barca has at the back. With a proper service or even little service, Lewandowski could get one. From there, I go Pedri, Busquets, Ter Stegen, and Rafinha in that order. It's necessary for them to play well for Barca to get a result. It's Pedri and Busquets because when Bayern take control of this match, which they will do, and I would say that Xavi may even let them do for large stretches, how Pedri and Busi navigate that and then start the counters will be essential. I want to say Araujo for putting out fires, but all of Garcia, Araujo, Balde, and Koundé will need to put out at least one. Ter Stegen, though, much like he's already done this season, he'll likely be asked to keep Barca in this game until Lewandowski gets his. And finally, Rafinha getting in behind Davies is arguably the biggest tactical victory that Barcelona needs to win to give themselves a chance at success. Alright, so I think we covered everything for this match. I gave you 5 players on both teams, and that's pretty much half those squads. So 5 players on both teams to consider and watch to be key to this match. We did the tactical breakdown and where both teams have their pros and their cons, especially on the press. I also gave my general feelings, which I'll contradict when it's time to actually review it, which we will have the match review later on tomorrow night. It'll come out a few hours after the game when I really get a good look at it, maybe even see the game twice, as well as a podcast the next day where we'll do some further analysis. And so you don't miss anything, please subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca.